dance. It's different on the transaction side than it is on the dispute side simply because of these cognitive errors we discussed. We've heard for years that metabolism and the breakfast theory has something to do with our results in court. Don't forget it when you're negotiating a deal. Here's a quick graph that came out of empiricists were trying to quantify how people process the same information at different points in the day. That actually wasn't their starting thesis. But they went to Israel to see what was driving parole decisions. They thought it was great empirically because there was only two answers, up or down. People were paroled or they weren't, and they wanted to see why. Was it the underlying crime, the victim, the behavior in prison? What drove the decisions? None of that correlated. But what did was what time the cases came on for consideration. The graph you might see here shows that your chances of being paroled are well into the 70s. You got a 3 in 4 chance at 9:30 in the morning. But good heavens, if you come up at 11:30 after the judge gets tired, metabolism slows, your chances drop to near zero. Same kind of cases, different results depending on what time of day. That's critical in mediation. We laugh that there's 3 basic periods of the mediation. There's the opening, when people are exchanging information, they're taking tough positions, oftentimes in money that they make extraordinary efforts to justify with elaborate spreadsheets and reports to show that there's something to it. The pace is slow. But as we'll see in a minute, the deal's largely done by the concession, not the original anchor. Anchoring matters, but the concession between the second and third, or first and second, and the second and third offers are what define the day. That's consistent with what chess masters tell us about chess theory, that matches can last for a whole day, but the board's set in the first 2 or 3 moves. Then you've all been in that aggravating period in the second bump there where we get tired, we get hungry, we start saying things to the mediator like, I hope you haven't ordered lunch yet. They've got to get reasonable. I've got an early flight. All the usual objections that come from we're making progress, but it doesn't seem like enough. Then we get into what mediators have called the middle muddle. It tracks with that second bump where people have had lunch. We're still a long ways apart. What they sometimes don't realize is that the pace of play from first dot to second dot and from second to third has put them on a trajectory to win the game. But they get impatient because there's still a big gap. And so middle muddle, sometimes that's usually the largest chance of impasse. The deal's really done in the first third of the mediation. You're on the trajectory. Signals have been sent that it'll settle. But the middle muddle is just a grind. And often the best we can do is keep them off the elevator so that they stay and make it to closing. We spend a lot of time discussing closing. And you can see on the metabolic curve that that's when people are really having the toughest time making non-inert decisions. Judges in Israel, the non-inert decision is to cut someone loose. The inert decision is to let them rot in jail. In litigation, the inert decision is to let the lawsuit keep going and later blame it on a dumb judge or dumb jury for the outcome rather than taking the responsibility. So lots of theatrics in the end. But the deal's basically done. The magnets are close enough together that it almost becomes irrational to take on the large transaction cost to close the remaining gap. But there's lots of theatrics. People have to come up with the hero story. What are they going to tell? Everybody's got a boss. What are they going to tell the boss at work, the boss at home, the guy at the bar about why they made the decision to settle a case rather than to let it go to trial and blame it on someone else? And they're doing it at the lowest metabolic load that they can do. Neurologists tell us that these little 3-pound pieces of Play-Doh in our heads don't weigh much, but they consume about 40% of our metabolic load. They are really active and run a lot. And so the question here is not to diagnose, but to help. If we know this is going on, and we know that our best chances of setting deals up for success are in the first third, what are we going to do about it? How are we going to play in and as advocates, as parties, as mediators, use what we know about System 1 thinking to get there?